were not at our member meeting this morning, shame on you if you're a member, but we had an announcement with a bit of a change in schedule. Congressman Latta let us know last night that he was not feeling well, and this morning they let us know that he has no voice. So we are starting at 9:30 with our first panel, but I do want to give you a kind of a preview of the day. We'll be moving through the schedule almost as you see in this actual schedule, with the exception of a couple adjustments in the length of some panels. But we will be finishing at 12:30, adjourning for lunch, and then coming back in here for a roundtable with DOE and state officials, talking about how we can both learn from them about how they're thinking about infrastructure funding, as well as ask them what we can do to help them. And that'll help inform the strategic plan that we're developing. We presented the strategic plan for GridWise for the next 3 years this morning at the members meeting, but I'm happy to provide that to other people and get your feedback and interest, as that'll really inform what we do, not just for the next 3 years, but how we position ourselves for what happens when the IIJA funding is gone, and we want to continue to remain relevant, in the coming years. So that's the preview of today. Let me introduce our panel, our first panel today, which is a discussion around how prosumers are driving the marketplace. And we're really thinking about this panel as looking behind the meter and how we integrate what's happening behind the meter. And then we'll have a kind of utility scale in front of the meter discussion after the break. So let me ask the first panel to come forward. And Danielle Sass-Burnett from NARUC is going to moderate the panel and introduce her fellow panelists. So thank you.
You're going to need this over here. Yep. Good morning, folks. We're just getting settled here. It's so nice to be with you today. I am Danielle Sass-Burnett with the NARUC Center for Partnerships and Innovation, and excited to be able to talk with these panelists about kind of where the rubber meets the road on behind the meter technology and what it's looking like on the ground in some really exciting ways. As you saw on the agenda, the discussion today is about the prosumer. So as I think everyone in this room is comfortable with that terminology, we're really talking about someone who both produces and consumes energy, but I think of it also as a proactive customer, or a customer who has options for their engagement, whether that's their participation through automation or self-control partnerships. I think we'll get into, or at least touch on, all of those different pieces of the puzzle for prosumers this morning. I wanted to say a little bit in the tee up about the NARUC's interest in this space, and I feel very echoey, so hopefully it's not too bad for you all back there. The National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, NARUC, is of course the member association for all of the state utility commissions across the country. I'm the director of the Center for Partnerships and Innovation, which is essentially the technical assistance team for the commissioners and the commission staff. Our focus is really on emerging challenges and connecting our commission members with expertise and strategies to support the complex decision-making that's at the heart of moving many of these technologies forward in the monopoly-regulated utility space. I think we have a graphic somewhere. Let me see. Sorry, there we go. Okay, thank you, Marguerite. About what we're really talking about today, and I wanted to just share this in that we're not talking just about distributed energy resources. We're also talking about demand flexibility. We're talking about, as I mentioned before, automation and control. And the NARUC members, the commissioners that I work for, are as aware of these trends as anyone. And we're doing a lot to support their education and helping them get up to speed on what it looks like with the ultimate customer and how that relates to utility business models. Just quickly, from our perspective, we have been supporting our members on the left-hand side of your screen with AMI discussions, data sharing discussions, advanced inverters, and helping them understand 1547 standard from IEEE and what interconnection advances are necessary from both processes and standards adoption. We're working on grid services and resilience when it comes to home batteries and demand flexibility with price-responsive water heaters. Of course, there's a ton of work happening, and you'll hear more about it today, I think, on electric vehicles, transportation electrification more broadly, and ensuring that we get prices right from the commission side and the utility side. Moving farther along the graphic, we're talking about and supporting them as they think about ADMS and DERMS deployment among utilities to help engage and control these different devices. On the insulation, the efficient windows, adaptive LED lighting with home energy efficiency programs, and again, I said demand flexibility, plus the foundations or the overlays, depending on how you're thinking about it, of cybersecurity, of digitization, of data sharing. These are all really important pieces of the puzzle, part of this complex space that we're going to talk about more today. And later on in the discussion, I'll be happy to share some of the questions that commissions are asking of their utilities, of the vendor utility partners, about what they need to feel confident in, what they need to know in order to feel like they are making best informed decisions they can in the public interest on costs and benefits and deployment schedules and whatnot. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But right now, I'm excited to turn to our panel and hear more about, as I said, what's happening on the ground. So Jonathan's going to start us off with Landis & Gyr and talk, introduce yourself for a minute first, please, and then talk a little bit about your organization's work in the landscape.
Sure. Pleasure to be here. Jonathan Staub, I'm the Director of Product Management at Landis & Gyr for devices in our Americas region. Really excited to be talking to you all, particularly about the adoption of distributed energy resources and where our technology is going to address an entirely new wave of AMI communication and solution technology. All right, to get started, I want to further baseline the discussion around the evolution of AMI utility use cases. So there's a direct correlation between the waves of technology to the adoption of consumer and direct benefits. To further orient us, I would look across the x-axis. This is where you have direct consumer benefits. The y-axis, this is utility operational benefits. We've divided it up into 3 different waves. Each of those waves, think of that as a significant technology evolution with the AMI solution. The first wave, this was very much operational centric. This is meter to cash functions. This is remote meter reading. This is the ability to do things like remote service disconnect. Distribution automation falls into this, with the goal of offsetting operational expenses in terms of having truck rolls, eliminating truck rolls to the field. The second wave, this is where we got more engaging with consumers. This is where we were able to do things like critical peak pricing, variable rates, the concept of engaging consumers through consumer portals to provide unprecedented access to energy usage information. The third wave in this evolution happens to be the wave that we're in right now. This wave, I would argue, is probably the largest technological advancement, and it involves direct and often real-time engagement with consumers. The ability to measure electrical waveforms to distinguish individual loads within a premise and provide that real-time insight. The ability to take that information and provide safety alerts, and also to engage, for instance, distributed energy resources, supporting prosumers, those that both consume and supply the grid. At Landis & Gyr, our solution for addressing this third wave of use cases is a solution called Rebello and the associated edge to enterprise components of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And next, we're going to have an exciting live demonstration by Colin Gibbs from Sense. Do you want to
Sure. My main objective this morning is to not trip anybody with this cord, and also trying some AV stuff here, which I shouldn't be doing live. But so first and foremost, Colin Gibbs, Vice President of Energy Services at Sense. It's useful for me to understand in the room if we have any Sense users today. All right, there's a couple, but I have some work to do. Okay.
It's good you're here.
Yeah. So
I think they're planted.
Right, exactly. So it's a really great opportunity to sit up here and talk to you today, particularly kind of building off of some of the things that Jonathan mentioned. So as we think about some of the main topics, real-time engagement, how we involve consumers in sort of the energy transition, not to be reductive about it. I know we hear these terms a lot. But I want to give you a really practical view of what it means to have a real-time experience for customers, and then we'll talk about the technology that makes this possible. So we can transition over to my phone if you don't mind. Okay, so first and foremost, I'm going to do one other thing that I shouldn't do in a live presentation. I'm going to text my wife because I have enlisted her help. You should also know that she lives in Portland, Oregon, so it's what, 6:40 in the morning. So she's going to turn some things on in the home so that you get a sense of what we're talking about. But this is a Sense consumer experience today. So when we say real time, we are talking about a real time experience. Okay, so typically what we see across a utility portfolio of engagement opportunities is more of an historical view of what your home looks like. And even with disaggregation, we're talking about customers seeing in reflection of what they did over the past month, what their usage is. You'll see that the coffee kettle just popped on. It's important to know that this is not a smart coffee kettle. This is not an IoT device. This is just some regular old electric resistance coffee kettle that we use in the morning. So what we're doing at Sense is we're taking advantage of the really unique signatures that you see from individual devices. And again, we're not talking about historical, we're talking about what's happening in our home right this very second. Kind of looking through the rest of the app here, I don't want to give you a full demonstration as much as give you an idea of the kinds of things that new metering investments will help enable. At some point, my dryer is going to turn on, so I want to make sure you see that. But we also have this sort of infinitely scrollable news feed about your home. And it's also important to understand that not every customer is necessarily interested in all of the little energy nuances happening within their home. What we feel is that if we want to talk about these big topics of decarbonization and electrification, the reality is that customers are going to have a huge impact on the success of those things. We have to acknowledge that not every customer is going to be engaged around the topic of energy. But if we want to engage customers in a way where they can become part of that transition, use devices in their home more effectively, tie those to the time of day that it makes the most sense from a grid operations perspective, we need to find creative ways to engage them. So what we're talking about within the app experience here is not just the view of what your energy looks like, but what your entire home looks like, how your home's performing, indications of something you may have done in your home that you didn't intend to do. Like, for example, you left and you realize after you left that your cooktop is still on. Or you've waited for your kids to come home and you see that the garage door opened. Things of that nature that give people a real-time view about what's going on in their home. If you drive into an individual appliance when they're on, for example, customers can get a sense of sort of the health, if you will, or the overall operating conditions of that appliance. Not surprising, a dryer is a pretty big load. So if you drive into any one of these individual things, you can see sort of the total contribution that that device has on your cost for that year. You can see the general patterns of how it's used. You can see the timelines, et cetera. So we don't just use this as an opportunity to tell customers, this is the energy that you're using, but also here's how you could use that device more effectively. And at times as well, if we see something wrong with that particular device. So I wanted to just kind of give you a few other views here with some of the features within the app. So what we're basing all of this on, as I mentioned, is real-time disaggregation. I'm sure a lot of people in the room are familiar with what non-intrusive load monitoring or disaggregation means. I want you to throw all of that out. What we've done historically is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the recognition of really unique things happening in the home in real time at that very moment to engage consumers. And if you think I'm crazy that this is something worth pursuing, you really need to think about how you engage with any other service provider in your daily lives. So I like to use the example of a banking app. A lot of people in the room probably have the app from their bank or their credit card. if you had a fraudulent charge, for example, on your banking or on your bank account or on a credit card, and you found out about it 30 days later, it wouldn't do a whole lot of good, would it? And that's essentially what we're talking about here. If there's something wrong within your home, or if there's something that's driving really high usage, it's going to have a major cost impact at the end of the bill, customers need to know about it in that moment. So again, not an earth-shattering observation here and something you'll hear across industries, but something that historically we've not been able to do in the sort of electric consumer experience, in part because we've not had the technology to enable it. To Jonathan's point, that's changing. Just a few quick other things that I wanted to show you before I ditch the demo here. So I won't go through all of these features, but another thing worth pondering is when we get beyond just encouraging customers how to use energy. I mentioned health and safety of the home as well. So a few extra things that we're testing within the app experience now and plan to do more going forward, and I think this is an interesting real-world example of what's possible through new metering technology. Helping customers identify whether or not there's a floating neutral in their home, for example. So any kind of electrical issue that could result in a fire hazard. Further, letting customers know if we see any sort of power quality issues within their home. Could be an issue within the home itself, but could also be an issue from the utility service, the transformer out in front of the house, or somewhere within the local distribution system. So again, even if consumer experiences from an energy management standpoint aren't necessarily the entry point that you're considering, I would certainly encourage you to think about this more broadly too around the overall health and safety of the home and the electrical system leading to the home. And lastly, we're doing our best to give customers a real-time view of what their carbon impact looks like as well. This is increasingly important to a lot of customers. What we've done here, you'll see mine's kind of boring because I mentioned I live in the Pacific Northwest, so we're mostly hydro. It's not quite as dynamic as what you would see in California, for example. But nonetheless, giving customers a real-time view of what their carbon impact is. And you can see the opportunity here in the future to tie home automation, because we're doing a lot of that direct software interface within the app as well, to carbon signals on the grid or to a time variable price, time of use rate schedules, EV charge schedules, et cetera. So where today it's very much about information and behavior, in the future it's about tying these inputs directly to customers' cost impacts and carbon impacts. So you can kill the demo now, so nothing crazy comes up on my phone that I don't want the room to see. So I actually have one in my bag, and I forgot to bring it up here, but just a really quick explanation about, technically what we're doing to make this possible. So historically, Sense has been a consumer company. So we've sold this piece of hardware. It's a little orange box. You've probably seen it advertised at some point. I hope, Kristen, people have seen it. So Kristen's on our marketing team in the back here. She focuses more on marketing to our utility partners and metering partners. But we do a lot of work, trying to make customers aware of the purchase opportunity to go pursue this themselves. But I will note that it's a $300 device. We recommend that an electrician installs it because you have to open up the panel. It costs generally $150 or so for an electrician to install it. And you also have sort of the pain factor of scheduling an electrician visit to your house. Pretty simple sort of sub-metering approach. The box goes directly in the panel, 2 CTs around the mains, powered by a breaker, and a little antenna that goes out for Wi-Fi. But again, not necessarily the thing that a regular customer would pursue. Maybe a lot of people in this room would, but not your average consumer. So what is so critical about why we're talking about this today and why this is going to be something you hear more and more from Sense and other companies is that next generation meters, like for example, the Landis+Gyr Revelo meter, are now the path to get that to customers. So where we've done this hardware approach in the past, we are moving to a strictly software-based approach. So what that means is as the Revelo meters roll out with utilities here moving forward, and Al will talk a little bit about what that looks like for Otter Tail, because they are rolling out those meters. Sense comes ready to go as software within that meter. So a customer can connect the meter to Wi-Fi, really simple sort of provisioning process that looks like any other IoT device, and then they're off. They can use Sense just like that. So $450 or so of just immediate value for a customer, so they don't have to go purchase those things, and we can make that type of real-time experience available to as many customers as possible. So I will hand it over to Al.
All right. I'm going to move over here because I like to use my hands when I'm talking, and I can't hold paper and use my hands and all that. So
You like this too?
All right, thank you. So I'm Al Kakritz with Otter Tail Power Company. I lead our advanced concepts and our energy measurement and control groups. And as a part of that, I'm leading our what we call Innovation 2030. So we got some new systems. I'd say we're behind the industry in systems, if you would. And now we're like rushing to catch up, if you would. So let's just talk a little bit about Otter Tail Power, because I think it's important to know, I got to back up. So safety, like all of us, I'm sure in our industry, is important. And we always try to open with a brief moment of safety. And so I would encourage you, if you're traveling, to let somebody know, if you're not with somebody that's with you, let somebody know that you're safe today. Text them or do something like that. But just a reminder that you want to be safe no matter where you're going. So I have to do that to hold to our value. Anyway, we are a very small electric utility. We're based in 3 states, Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. And you can see the graphic on the screen there as to where we're at. And it was interesting because yesterday I thought, well, nobody knows us. Nobody knows where we're at generally. We're like the second smallest IOU in the nation. But then I picked up the RTO Net Zero Insider. And that's our area on the cover right there. So some of the projects that MISO and SPP are working on, their joint planning, are part of what we've got going on. And so that was kind of an interesting little find for me yesterday. But we are 70,000 square miles, the size of Missouri or Wisconsin, if you would. We're a 115-year-old utility. And we have only 130,000 customers in our 70,000 square miles. So a lot of people would think, oh, well, you're kind of like a distribution co-op. Well, we're not really, because we have 422 little communities scattered throughout. So just put 420 dots in that little area there, and that's what we have for a customer base, an average of 400 population in each of those little communities out there. So we do have communities that are, 10, 15,000, 2, 3 of those, but that's kind of our base. And with that, we have 44,000 load control devices already. So we've been doing load control 40 plus years. So we have about a 35% penetration from a load control device to our customers, if you would. So we're excited about that. We feel like we've really done a good job with load control to date. If you think about some of the technologies that are out there, some of the things that you can do, we're in a situation where we've got a lot of substations, 490 substations, and over 70% of those only have one feeder. So we're not talking about Flizzr, we're not talking about high-speed switching, not much for ADMS likely, but we'll see how that rolls out for us as we move through this new situation. And we have, as noted, about 11,000 miles of line, 6,000 of that's transmission, what we call transmission, 40,000 and above. But we got a lot of new 345 coming through our area because of all the wind and renewable energy that's being developed in our area. And where we're at in our system advancements right now, Jonathan talked about wave 1, 2, and 3. We're essentially going from wave 0 to wave 3. We have no automated meter reading to date. We're doing everything manually except for a small handful of larger customers that are typically a cellular-based meter read. And so we're really taking the big leap, and that's going to be a strong advantage for our customers. And with that, we're currently deploying our first OMS system. And because our legacy load management system is so old, we're in the middle of reviewing our RFPs, and we're going to be replacing that system soon as well. So a lot behind who we are at Otter Tail Power and where we're going. So a little bit on the prosumer side, I think is important here. You can see this is just a slide showing the distributed generation we have connected to our system there. But it's helpful to kind of get in mind where we're at. And you can see the orange on the graph. It might be hard to read the legend, but that's wind. We're a heavy, as I mentioned, heavy resource wind area. We have net capacity factors in our states that range 45, 50% for some of the wind facilities that are built out there. And to date, we have about 118 prosumers, if you would, customers that have interconnected some sort of energy to our system. But right now we have 21 requests for a total of 120 megawatts. So 120 megawatts. So 12 times the amount that we currently have right now is what people are talking about investing or connecting to our system out there. So it's a pretty exciting situation. And we also have customers that are really interested in taking advantage of other parts of the market, looking at being net zero themselves, looking at ways that they can contribute to MISO and potentially the ancillary service market, and things like being load modifying resources and items like that. So we've got heavy engagement with our customers. We're small, but we're nimble, and we always look at things as to what we can do for the customers at the right price, the right value. And our residential rates are about 30% below the national average. And so when we think about that, we think about striking the right balance consistently for each of our customers. With that, I think Danielle is going again.
Thank you, Al.
You bet.
Great. Maybe we want to have the people up. So thank you all for the previews. It's certainly exciting to hear a little bit about what's coming up. I'm sorry, I wanted to get everyone's names up here. Guess not. Okay. Oh, not me. The whole panel. But in any case, it's very exciting to hear about what's coming up. And so, Al, I wanted to start back with you and ask you to talk a little bit more. Sorry. About
It's me.
when you are saying customers, who are you talking about in your service territory, and what are the kinds of things, what are the interactions looking like for integrating some of these technologies more specifically with those customers, and then we'll work our way back.
Yeah, well, we've got, so we think about all customers from the, basic residential, low consumer kinds of situation up through some of our larger industrial, commercial customers as well. Enbridge Pipeline is a substantial customer for us, comes through our area. And so we look at all of them collectively, if you would, in that regard. Of course, we tailor, if you would, our offerings to those that have different appreciation for what that might be. For example, we've got one larger customer that we're working with that we can't really talk specifics about them, but they're looking at some large behind the meter wind situations so they can be a net zero carbon company themselves, so in the hundreds of megawatts practically. So just kind of across all that platform, and when we think about the engagement side of each of those customers, as we're rolling out the Revelo meter, we're rolling out the opportunities with the Sense app that Colin displayed, we're thinking a lot about how can we meet each one of those customers individually, and how can we meet with them at the place they want to get met with, like what matters to them. That's so important to us. We hear it when we go to our different commissioners, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota. They're always talking about, hey, you serve this small home in rural North Dakota, and maybe they don't care about some of these advanced offerings. So we're always challenged on that opportunity, like what do we do for them and with them. We're grateful because as we deploy our AMI system, it's actually going to be a cost reduction for our customer base. So that's exciting for us. We're going to save our customers money as we move through that, and we're going to be able to find a way to offer them things like the Sense app as well. So we look across all those formats and different types of customers.
Thanks, Al. Jonathan, do you want to talk a little bit more in depth about what this new meter offers and how you partner with utilities like Otter Tail on the deployment?
Absolutely. So as you heard, Revelo, it's a grid sensor. You need to think of this as much more than an electricity meter that you've traditionally thought of as measuring buckets of energy to produce, again, a meter to cash bill. Revelo, again, grid sensor, able to analyze waveforms, the profile of that electricity such that you can distinguish individual loads like Colin was showing in his application. Powerful enough to incorporate edge intelligence applications for use cases that address, again, both utility operations and the consumers. Wi-Fi on board, again, to facilitate that communication and interaction with consumers at the location. Complement that with an ecosystem of the components to develop, qualify, deploy, market, test, manage edge applications for Revelo. So again, we believe in an open edge app ecosystem addressing a multitude of use cases, again, geared towards both consumers and the utility.
And are there different types of deployments? Obviously, you're working with a largely rural, spread out, diverse, and yet
all types of
utility
deployments, be it investor-owned utilities down to public power and cooperatives. The Revelo solution is a great fit.
Great, thanks. And Colin, can you talk a little bit about how the mechanics of your hardware and software integrate through Al's customers, or maybe it's through the meter to Al's customers? How do you fit into this ecosystem with them?
Yeah, sure. So we've been working with Landis for several years, actually predating my time at Sense. So it's been a project that's gone on for quite some time. I'd say, Sense is a really tangible example of what a sort of on-the-meter app looks like. But, fast forwarding, Sense won't be the only one. I think the idea of meters enabling customers to have access to other valuable applications and experiences, is a prediction that the company had a while ago. And we were really like-minded with Landis in that respect. So at its simplest form, essentially now we don't need Sense hardware to get to those customers that deploy these types of meters. That's not to say that Sense won't continue to sell a direct-to-consumer hardware to enable that, because unfortunately, not every meter is going to change in the next couple of years. But where those meters are being purchased, we don't need that anymore. And so what that means is that our core software, so that runtime analysis, our ability to see what's popping on in the home, that's all running at the edge on the meter itself. Not possible to move that granularity of data up to the cloud, obviously. So a lot of that is happening locally on the meter. So that enables kind of two pathways. One pathway is directly over the meter network, over the field area networks, or some reduced granularity data that the utility can have access to directly, but also providing customers the opportunity to connect that meter to their home Wi-Fi and then get the real-time experience that I showed on the phone. So again, I state this in really definitive terms because it's hard as a hardware company to impress upon people that we don't endeavor to sell hardware, forever, but we critically do not need that path anymore. So again, great sort of opportunity for Sense as a company, but again, more importantly, really big opportunity for customers to have what has been reserved for kind of, because of the high price point, a very specific customer class to now be available to everybody.
And does the software also interact with EVs and battery storage and any of the other devices that we saw in our graphic earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So, everything I showed today was very behavior-based. And unfortunately, I kind of have a boring home, so I don't have storage, on my home.
We won't judge.
Yeah, thank you. That will change over time. But yeah, so the big advantage to having software at the edge is we can do software integrations, APIs locally at the edge to enable that more sort of home automation type of experience for customers. So we'll be doing a lot more of that. We have a handful of very consumer-centric integrations today, things that you're really familiar with around smart thermostats and smart plugs and EVSE, charge point EVSE, for example. We're really building a much larger network of device connections to vehicles themselves, for example. So that's a big part of where the company is going, and again, kind of where we predict the industry needs to go, which is rather than bugging customers to make small behavioral changes, allowing them to automate the way that their homes react to certain conditions on the grid. So absolutely.
Awesome. We've been anticipating this future for over a decade, right, at least. Where do you each think we're going to be, let's say 5 years from now? Because we're moving so fast. I think we're past the decade time horizons in this prosumer market. Al, do you want to?
Okay, well, at Otter Tail, if we think out 5 years beyond that, or whatever it might be, we really are focused on how we're going to engage our customers as we work with the Landis & Gear team and the Sense team, and we consider our new load management system as well. We're really looking for ways that we can kind of bundle that all together, and we don't think it's going to be just tomorrow. It's going to be, it's going to be evolutionary. It's going to be revolutionary in many ways for us initially, and then it's going to be evolutionary is what I believe as we move forward. We really think that we've got some opportunities to help our customers by providing the Sense app, the Sense capability to them directly. And then we also feel, as we kind of work through some of the data concerns and those pieces, because we wouldn't want to, cause any customer, consumer, prosumer concerns about our having their data. But we look for ways that we can potentially do better load control, maybe individual types of load control. Maybe we can establish systems that customers can opt out or opt in. Maybe they can use the app itself to know, hey, well, I can turn my dryer off right now, or I could do these kinds of things. And so we really look ahead at those kinds of situations. And then as we think about the technology with the Revelo and the Wi-Fi capability, we also feel like we've got to manage our way through the Wi-Fi side of it, if you would. Do we want to be on a customer's home network? Do we want to do device-to-device communication only? Because we also realize that if we're relying on a customer's network, and they can say that they didn't get the signal because their internet service was disrupted for this reason or that reason, that's another thing that we've got to manage our way through and just be mindful of, so that we don't cause problems that were unintended for ourselves or for our customers. So we really look at these technologies as something that we can embrace and that we can really roll into the many different ways. The potential DERMS part, and I look at the Sense side to that, the load control piece. I see a lot of opportunities that we have as we move ahead.
Thank you, Al. And Jonathan, I'm sure the path is growth.
Sure.
But can you tell you a little bit more about where it's going?
Sure. Let me just say the adoption of distributed energy resources greatly complicates grid management. It's no longer about centralized generation. There's opportunities now to manage, again, these two-way flows of energy at a particular premise, to manage the intermittent nature of distributed energy resources. Opportunities with applications, as an example, to collaborate and communicate amongst generation sources for things like redundancy, things like that. It's my job as a product manager. We have a future-ready platform here with Revelo. It's meant to be built upon, again, with the edge app capabilities to, again, support the future of use cases as they come.
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question to answer succinctly because I think there's a lot of things that are going to change over the next 5 years. But I'll give you the Sense version of it, I suppose. I mean, again, the idea of a consumer application running off of a meter and providing customers real-time device-specific view of their energy, like I cannot overstate how profoundly different that experience is from what customers get today. And our view of it is, I mean, number one, as utilities around the country, whether they're a Gen 0 or a Gen 1, that will be inevitably changing meters at some point here over the next decade, that decisions are made in a way where that future is being enabled for their customer base. And then we can sort of innovate on that, right? We can build other consumer experiences and other utility value streams off of customers having that type of experience. From a homeowner's perspective, I mean, I agree with absolutely everything Jonathan said. I think to kind of frame it in a consumer experience standpoint, we have a lot of smart devices in homes now, a lot of IoT devices, smart thermostats, smart everything. I don't understand necessarily why a dryer needs to be smart, but they are. So there's a lot of opportunities to have connected things within the home, but what we lack from a homeowner's perspective are sort of smart systems within the home. So seeing the home at the whole level. and then making decisions, whether they're automated decisions or they're behavioral decisions, based on that particular device's relationship to total energy use within the home at that particular point in time, or aggregate it up a little bit more, decisions based on energy usage across that transformer or that feeder. The fact that a point-by-point solution exists today enables certain changes, but doesn't enable that synchronization that we think is pretty critical to managing everything that Jonathan mentioned happening on the grid.
Right. We've been talking in particular about what the customer, prosumer perspective and potential benefits are, but this does need to be of value to the grid ultimately, and to the utilities who operate the grid and the third parties who are interacting on the grid. And so I think there's a really important question here about how do we get from the customer perspective to the grid perspective, and how do all of these technologies enable better grid management, which is where I think you were starting to go, Jonathan. Do any of you have comments on the grid value side of these transformations?
As I mentioned before, again, a much more complicated energy management situation. So again, don't just think of these as consumer benefiting apps that can be supported by this platform, but also grid-facing apps, things like grid location awareness, understanding individual mapping to phase and transformer, as an example, voltage optimization, never before experienced power outage capabilities that not only help you pinpoint in real time the location of that outage, but can provide insights into actually what's causing that outage. So those are just a few of the, again, grid-facing benefits of, again, a flexible platform like this.
You can see from our perspective where, you know, we have hardware users today. They're kind of indiscriminately scattered around the country, right? They don't necessarily have any direct relationship to how we would think about managing a distribution network. But when that same technology is deployed across a contained geographic area, a feeder, a service territory, et cetera, the types of anomalies that we see pop up within the home, when you see them happen across a network of other homes and you balance that against the topology of the local distribution system, you get a really good idea of where certain things are happening within the system. So I think grid sensor is, you know, a really useful way to think about this, and certainly the types of signals that we get from the meter allow us to sort of see that in the sort of real-time view, and certainly today we let customers know if there's some sort of strange voltage thing going on in their home, and oftentimes it's an issue with a transformer, for example. So we tend to think about that sort of future use case as something that, you know, new meters enable, and hopefully Sense can help provide some customers experience around as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, when we think about that, you know, similar to what Colin said, you know, we have 175,000 meters for 130,000 customers. We feel like we're going to have 175,000, you know, sensing devices out there, and we're looking to be more proactive with power quality kinds of things even. So even if it doesn't appear to be an issue, no one's complaining about something, we're excited to have the opportunity to get all that data. We don't know how that's going to happen just yet, but we're excited. We know that the Sense team has done some stuff already with some of their items, but we're excited to get that data so we can be more proactive in dealing with power quality kinds of situations for our customers, and potentially, you know, reducing the times that we have to run somebody out to an actual home or business to do power quality monitoring. So we're excited about how that might come together for us. And then, similar to what Jonathan mentioned, Colin mentioned, just the analytical piece to it, the advanced grid pieces that we can do to make our system more reliable, invest our money in the right projects as we look ahead, and those are things that we are hopeful for as we look at the grid side of it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I'm hearing about benefits around control, around visibility, around consumer engagement, operational benefits, analytical benefits. I had suggested at the beginning I would share a little bit about what some commissions are usually asking for and looking for and considering approving these types of investments by utilities. And then I want to open up the floor for questions from our audience. So this is your preview. You get to ask questions in just a couple of minutes. On the commission side, We have recently been working with Department of Energy and some of their colleagues at the national labs and elsewhere, plus, of course, with our own working groups, to find out what are commissioners really looking for in terms of information, in terms of the use case, the business case for a variety of technologies. And most recently, we held what we call a financial toolbox. It was an hour and a half long webinar and a summary brief around ADMS and DERMS and what kinds of things commissions are looking for. We had a wonderful commissioner from Michigan join us and share a number of the questions that their commission looked at recently when they did end up approving deployments by some of their investor-owned utilities. And of course, they're talking about what are the benefits to the customer, which we covered, what are the benefits to the grid and to operations. Are they measurable and quantifiable? Commissions are at a point where they really want more detailed information than perhaps in the past when they're talking about large-scale aggregated power plants and on a different scale and a different dimension of risk and cost. They want to understand what are the individual components of the different technologies that we're talking about putting out there. Are they part of a plan? Are there going to be additional costs that are going to be required, additional investments to actually enable the benefits? Many folks across the country learned that AMI 1.0 did not in fact come with all of the benefits that we were hoping for, and that 2 and 3.0 in fact do. But that's the way this works, right? There's early stage deployments, there's hardware, there's software, and so commissions want to have as complete a picture as possible about what a deployment is going to look like over multiple phases. They want to know about what that time frame might look like to set expectations appropriately, and what are the risks of potential barriers, interoperability concerns for sure. We're trying to get that terminology in a place that's more comfortable for commissions. A couple of years ago, we did a set of interviews about interoperability and smart grid, and one of the responses was, "We think you made up that word." That word. But the efficiency benefits are well understood, and the operational benefits. But we need to explain what it means and how we get there. What is the life of the investments? We're not necessarily talking about 40-year power plants or 60-year power plants. We're talking about 10-year, 20-year kind of investments that are going to need to be swapped out or upgraded, or maybe have new versions of software deployed. How's that going to happen? When considering costs and benefit trade-offs, of course, it matters what the discount rate's going to be over how many years. And have similar technologies been used and worked in other states? So thank you all for showing one use case, one demonstration, an example. But that's always what question we get, especially as a national association, is where else has this been tried? What did it look like? What can we learn? So the more any of us who in this space can be sharing those best practices, those examples, the lessons learned, the more likely we are to be able to get more of this rolled out, right, across our states. Are there any questions that you're hearing in the regulatory and policy landscape that you would want to address before I turn to the audience?
To echo what you just said, we have the state of Minnesota, of course, is one of our jurisdictions, and definitely down the path that you just mentioned is wanting us to define, what are the costs, what are the costs we have, what are the benefits that we're receiving, and definitely there's a pressure test, if you would, of all these systems, and so, yeah, that'll be something we're going to face forever. So I agree with you.
Forever, have fun.
Yeah, definitely the question about customer value. I mean, no question. I worked for years in other companies that use 60-minute interval data and all sorts of complications about access to the data quality, and then ultimately how valuable are these types of experiences for customers. And I think part of what's incumbent upon us collectively is to put some tangibility to what customer value actually looks like. Absolutely doing all of the hard arithmetic to help prove that point, but also to literally demonstrate what are we talking about, in terms of customers getting access to real-time data, and what does that mean from a data privacy and cybersecurity standpoint? Like these are the discussions happening now that are kind of linchpins to this taking off. So.
That's great. Yes, it's good. It's helpful to remember that commissioners are real people too.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
They're very well equipped to read lots of filings, but they're happy to hear stories as well.
Yes.
Do we have any audience questions?
We do, and I'm going to start.
Karen, please.
And your last question was what I was going to ask, but I can build on that, which is, we have heard from our members the difficulty in getting AMI approved through their commissions sometimes because they haven't actually demonstrated benefits, or they, advocates ask for a time of use plan, and the commission may feel that there isn't a great time of use plan. We recently had some interactions with DOE and then advisors to DOE about the role of meters in the funding scheme for infrastructure. And there seems to be, and they were hearing from outside interests very strongly that, this misperception that AMI is widely deployed already, so why should we fund it? When the reality is that in some places it is, and in places like New England and others, it may be 20%, and even those meters are not the smartest meters and are not potentially, they may still be doing the 60-minute intervals. Or the necessity even of, or focusing in on the benefits of carbon reduction and not all the other benefits that an advanced meter can provide. So you said what the commissioners are asking for. What is it that GridWise could contribute to this? Because we have utilities that have the use case, we have the manufacturers. Is it webinars? Is it a report? Is it, speaking at your, at some of your events? What can we do to help educate on the benefits of smart meters?
At this point, generally speaking, the states that don't have smart meters yet are lacking interveners at the commissions who are willing to participate in the proceedings. So I don't know if that's a space for GridWise, but perhaps some of your members. Sometimes the utilities need help talking about what the benefits are and how this is all going to go and how it's going to all roll out. And there are a variety of very legitimate concerns about affordability, especially right now, right? Given what's happening with our energy system at the moment and the turbulence across the world. Affordability is a major concern. So making sure that within an actual proceeding where the decisions are being made, there's enough evidence about and enough of a plan demonstrated to show that these benefits will materialize, as we were talking about here, that consumers will in fact benefit and that's quantifiable, that the grid operations will be aided by having advanced meters and that additional visibility that can go along with it, particularly if you have the truly advanced meters and you're getting more than operational benefits. So I think supporting at the state level with actual proceedings in a variety of ways to help get over the hump of making the decisions that we all understand can ultimately have a huge beneficial impact. But as you note, one of the questions that I had was whether the IRA and the IIJA change any of this equation as we're moving forward. Certainly they do when it comes to talking about clean energy resources. When we're talking about the technology that supports all of that, are there going to be additional opportunities because of IRA or IIJA, and are any of you tapping into that?
Otter Tail's looking into that like every other utility. So our goal is to be able to take advantage of some of those opportunities specifically. So we're looking at, where does AMI fit into that? Certainly our load management system, where does that fit into that? And then I know we're looking at a couple other items that I'm not too engaged with right now, but definitely it's on our radar, and pretty much like everybody, middle of December, we're focused on those dates. So we'll definitely be in that space.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that it's not just the jurisdictions that don't have any AMI yet. It's also those that have V1, right? That there will be upcoming opportunities to pursue new meter investments in those places as well. And it's the same sort of talking point that you mentioned early on in the question around, well, we already have AMI, what's the value of an additional investment here? And again, I think it's important perhaps for interveners to sort of share the perspective on how limited the sort of solution set is by current infrastructure. And certainly the political optics of increased costs hopefully can be balanced in a way where we talk about the immense benefits that come with investments in the right infrastructure which I think is always a click down from all of the big topics around integration of distributed energy resources, electrification, and so on and so forth. But it really should be, I think the order should be different.
Interesting, thank you. We've got time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Rob Wilhite with Black & Beach. I'm in recovery mode as a home automation geek. Doors, cameras, thermostats. I even have a Bluetooth toothbrush. Seriously. But the one thing that really frustrates me, I just pulled my phone out and counted the number of different apps I have to use behind the meter in home automation as a prosumer. And right now I have 14 different apps on my phone. Wow. So the question to the panelists, and I'd love to hear your impressions, is there a scenario in the future where there might be a third-party platform that brings together all this automation, whether it's energy related or it's just automation in the home or the business, and maybe that's even a role on behalf of the utility in working with third-party platform providers. Can we get to a scenario we can eliminate all these proprietary software applications and have a single platform for ease and control? Because I think today that could be a barrier to prosumer adoption.
I make a comment, and I'm sure the smarter people can speak to it better, but that's exactly where I've landed at Otter Tail as well. We're, along with the things I mentioned before, we're setting up a new customer portal, and we're going to have an app for that. And we're working with Lannis & Gear, Ravello, Sense, and our customers are going to have an app for that. And that was the question I have had too, like how many apps does everybody want to have? So we're thinking about it. We're going to be talking about it more, but that's where we're at specifically, and maybe Colin or Jonathan have more intelligent answers than that.
Sure. So we've talked about home automation. It's exploding in terms of opportunities, not just for automation, but automation in the sense of energy management. Now, we also talked about interoperability, right? There is a big push of interoperability within the home automation space, and I would say, yes, in the future, there definitely is an opportunity for consolidation of those, in at least the energy management context.
Yeah, well, you put me in a funny position as a company that has an app to this one, but especially when I had to scroll forever to find my Sense app before the demo. I agree with you wholeheartedly. The way that we look at it is, first of all, there has been a real lack of interoperability standards for connected devices within the home. You're going to keep hearing this interoperability word now.
I'm comfortable with the word.
We do think that's going to change, right? And so from a company perspective, we've been trying to track the efforts towards common interoperability standards or platforms. There's one out there called Matter that we feel pretty confident will come together. So from like a back-end perspective and how things within the home are connected to each other, we have to, as a company, be on a glide path with something like that. So we pay a ton of attention to it. And then ultimately, as it relates to the consumer app, and Sense is a consumer company, right? We endeavor to have the Sense experience in front of consumers. But that also means that elements of that Sense experience should be available in other consumer experiences as well, be that a utility system or some other third-party consumer application that customers use. So we see that happening over time, and hopefully there are other companies out there that have a similar perspective. So I think it will change, probably slowly, but I anticipate it will change.
So unfortunately, we've run out of time, I understand. So please help me in thanking Colin and Jonathan and Al for sharing their perspective and a specific example.
Good job.